Hey guys, I'm hoping you guys can see me okay. I'm doing a quick 5-10 minute video. It's not going to be long. This is a new series that I'm doing called Work It Out Wednesdays. Just a quick workshop on any particular subject involving real estate that I'll do every week, either virtually or in person, probably more virtually for right now. Post it around lunchtime just so you guys can check it out on your lunch break. And my hope is that it'll actually help you guys throughout your week or throughout any of your real estate journey. You can use some of this information. So today we're talking about rent to own. I've had a lot of people reach out to me or ask me about rent to owns, and I figured it'd be a good subject to touch on, as opposed to doing a traditional mortgage. So when it comes to rent to owns, the most important thing you need to know before you even get into rent to owns is that the best way to go about it is to use a real estate attorney or a real estate professional to guide you through it. You will definitely need a real estate attorney to go over the contract, go over the options, and direct you in the best way possible if it's a good deal for you or if it's something that financially you will benefit from. So I always recommend getting a real estate attorney or getting some type of real estate professional to help you throughout the process. During this workshop, I'm actually going to be using an article that I will post either in the link, I'll post it in the comments, wherever YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook that it's on, it'll be below. So you can click on that link and just check it out for yourself and get a little more in depth on it, or just keep it for your back pocket. So the first thing to talk about is what is a rent to own. In the state of Louisiana, we call it a lease to purchase or a lease option. There is a difference between the two, and I'll go over that shortly. But the main thing you need to know is that if you do go and ask for a rent to own, you may hear lease purchase or lease option. It is a rent to own, but it's just another word for it, and they are two different things. Rent to own or lease purchase option or lease purchase agreement, what it essentially is it's a two-part deal. You have your first part, which is a lease agreement, and your second part, which is either the option to buy or the purchase option. And what that means is you're essentially forming a contract with two parts to it. You're going to be paying your lease part and also abiding by the purchase or the option to buy as the second part. Going forward, you really need to, like I said, whatever you choose to do, whether it's lease to purchase or lease option, whatever it is, you need a real estate attorney because they can look over the paperwork and make sure there aren't any hidden fees, any hidden agreements to the contract that you may or may not be missing. So let's get right into it. A rent to own agreement is a deal in which you commit to renting a property for a specific period of time with the option of buying it before the lease runs out. That's very important. A lot of people think that when you do a rent to own, it functions just like a rental where you rent out a place to live, and at the end of it, all of these payments that you've been making, you can use that to purchase at the end of the rental agreement. It doesn't work that way. I've had to explain to a lot of people before, like, it's not like owning a regular rental. There are more things that go into at least the purchase option. From there, a rent to own agreements include a standard lease and also an option to buy. And that's what I meant earlier by a rent to own is a two-part deal. You have your lease and then you have your option at the end to purchase. Lease option contracts, this is where it gets into the difference between a lease option and a lease purchase. When you're doing an option, you're selecting an option to buy. In that option, there'll be terms and agreements, but it is giving you an option to purchase at the end of the lease agreement. So, say you have a lease agreement for 5 to 10 years, you purchase an option, and at the end of those 5 to 10 years, that option is still there for you to purchase it. Does that make sense? And that differs from a lease purchase because if you're purchasing an option, you're just selecting an option to buy. You're just optioning to purchase it. Whereas if you're doing a purchase at the end of that lease, you will or may be required to purchase the home. Whether you can afford it or not, whether you can obtain a mortgage or not, you're selecting that you will be purchasing this home at the end of the agreement. So that there is a difference. Lease option contracts, like I said, give you the right to buy the home when the lease expires, while lease purchase contract requires you to buy the home. You pay your rent throughout the lease, and in some cases, a percentage is applied to the purchase price. So that's why I said a difference from a rental. When you go and sign up for a rental, you normally give your deposit first month's rent. When you go into a lease option or at least purchase, you are not starting off the same way. You're going to have to put probably a down payment, which is called the option that you're purchasing. So you're going to have some type of down payment option. Your rent will be a little bit higher, maybe a little bit higher, because you're optioning to purchase this home at the end of the lease agreement. You're not just paying rent. So keep that in mind. With some rent-to-own contracts, you may be required to maintain the property and pay for repairs. That kind of comes into more when you're doing the terms of the lease agreement. At the end of it, like I said, you may be required to buy it if you did a lease purchase, if you did an option, whatever the case may be. In the terms of that lease agreement, you may be required to obtain the yard. You just have to get your attorney to look at what your terms are. And some of them, they may require you to just keep the grass up and pay your regular utility bills. And others, they may require you to fix the roof, do improvements, pay property taxes. Whatever the case may be, it is different for both, and you need to make sure your attorney is looking over those agreements. What are rent-to-own homes? Rent-to-own homes are homes that include a clause in the rental agreement which either gives you the option to purchase, to buy, or an obligation. So that's the difference between the two. One of them, you're giving an option to say, hey, at the end of this, I may want to buy it or I may want to walk away. The other one is an obligation, and if you do not purchase it, if you cannot obtain a mortgage at the end of that lease agreement, they could sue you. And then you could lose everything that you put into it. Either option, you could lose everything that you put into it. Your option fee, your rental credits, anything that you put into it. At the end of it, if you choose to walk away or you cannot purchase the home, you're subject to losing everything that you've already put into it, which makes it very risky for some people. So going forward, you may make rent payments each month, and a portion of these payments can count towards your down payment. Should you decide to buy the excess money, it can be applied to the home purchase. So that's what I said earlier when I mentioned that if you are paying those rents every month, it may be higher, meaning most places $700 if you pay in $700 a month. That is standard because it meets what the landlord needs. Whereas for a lease purchase or rent to own option, because they have additional needs such as putting towards you purchasing the home or applying those rental credits, they may raise the rent to cover everything that needs to be covered. Because a lot of these people, they want to sell the home, but they also understand that lease to purchase or lease option gives them more options. It just takes longer than a regular purchase. Let's move forward. Should you decide to buy, the extra money can be applied to the home purchase. So that's what I meant by at the end, you may lose your rental credits. You may lose your option fee that you put to purchase that option to be able to buy at the end of the home. If you walk away, you could lose all of that. And listen, sometimes you're not just walking away. Sometimes it could be a family member passed away, loss of a spouse, change in financial situations, whatever it is. You can be put in a predicament where you just can't afford it anymore, and you have to move on. And that when that happens, then at that point you're forfeiting everything that you put into it, which is why it's very risky. Whereas a mortgage, say something changed in your financial situation, you can either sell the home, God forbid foreclose, but you can sell the home or refinance. So there's a little bit of a difference, is the control and the amount that you're putting into it is different from the two. Renting to own can be an appealing concept for people who are interested in owning property but have been shut out of traditional home buying process. So a lot of times when I see people ask me about rent to owns, it's because of two reasons. They don't have down payment or closing costs, and they don't have credit. So when it comes to rent to owns, your credit is not really being considered in most of them. Now, I can't promise that all of them, all owner financing, will not look at your credit, but I can promise you your credit score does not need to be the same as owning a traditional mortgage or going down the traditional home buying process. It is different. So for people who do not have credit or who have a low credit, this is an option for them because their credit situation may change. In 3 to 4 years, you may have the credit score to get a traditional mortgage than as if you would now. So that's the biggest pro to a rent to own or lease purchase is that you have time. It gives you that additional time. Whereas a mortgage, you need to have most of it as soon as you start the pre-approval process, and you start, you're under contract. You need to have all of that enforced before that even begins. So it is a little bit different. Let's see. Other than having that non-refundable upfront fees, I will say this: most everything's non-refundable. When it comes down to like if you do a traditional mortgage, if you pay for an inspection, that's not refundable. If you pay for an appraisal, that's not refundable. So there's really no difference on that end from a mortgage to a rent to own on refundable fees. They're non-refundable. Once you pay for it, that's it. If you walk away during a rent to own process, it's non-refundable. They're not giving you that back just because you walked away. Let's see. Yeah, like it says, you pay the seller a one-time non-refundable fee. That is your option fee. So you're saying I cannot buy this house right at this moment, but I want to buy an option to purchase it in 5 or 10 years. That is what you're paying for, which is big. Because if you came to me, if I was selling a car and I needed the money tomorrow, and you say, well, I don't have the money, but I do have some money to purchase an option to buy it later, that's normally not going to work for a car. But for a home, it could provide options that the seller may have not had. Either it's not selling or the market's down, whatever the case may be, that gives them more options. They can still get paid, it just takes them longer. But you do purchase that option fee. You're purchasing the ability to buy it later, is what that is. It's normally negotiable, and it's normally 1 to 5% of the purchase price. So if you're looking to at least purchase a $200,000 house, 1% or 5% of that $200,000 house is what you're paying for that option. Um, I've already discussed the lease to option versus the lease to purchase. You definitely need an attorney to look over both because some people will get into a lease, a rent to own, or a lease option or a lease purchase and think they're doing one or the other. You need to make sure you're doing the option if you're not looking to buy at the end of it. And I say that because a lot of people change their minds. 5 to 10 years from now, if you go to change your mind, yeah, you may lose all of your rental credits or your financial situation changes and you lose all your rental credits. You lose your option fee, but you will not be locked in or sued for not doing it. That's the difference. You're essentially protecting yourself in case your situation does change. The hope is that your financial situation will go up, your credit will go up, and then that way you can have it available from whenever you want to purchase a mortgage for the home. So that is the difference. Make sure you're not doing a lease to option and you're signing for a lease to purchase. Because then at the end of that 5 to 10 years, if you don't have the ability to purchase the home, now they can sue you. That is very important. Do not get locked into one or the other if you're not wanting to be. Let's see. I pretty much went over everything. And like I said, make sure you have an attorney to look over that for you. And pretty much it's the same process. If you're doing a lease to purchase, you pay a monthly rent to gain that purchase percentage towards your credit. Always, oh, that's one thing I forgot. When you're doing contract terms, make sure you know what is in the terms, whether it be what you're responsible for, who you're paying and when, how it's to be paid, what happens at the end of this agreement. You need to cover everything on what's in that agreement. So that way, when it gets to the end or if something changes, there's no up and down or any discrepancy about who does what. And the same thing for, especially for what you're responsible for, because if that's not outlined and then 2 years later, the landlord says, well, I need you to pay to fix the roof. Now you're in a discrepancy because you didn't agree to that, but it's not written. And that could be a void right there for the contract. So just always make sure that you're looking into what you're doing. Entering into a rent-to-own agreement typically means signing a formal legal contract. The contract should specify the terms of the agreement and whether you are obligated to buy the home or simply have the option to do so. Agreeing on the purchase price, always check when the purchase price is being locked in. Are you being locked in before when you're signing the agreement, or are they gonna put it on the purchase price at the end of the agreement? So if you're doing one for 10 years, if you have the purchase price at the beginning of those 10 years, that purchase price could be way different than the purchase price at the end of those 10 years. Make sure you know which ones are in the agreement, make sure you know the terms of each, and make sure it is locked in so that if it's lower before the 10 years and then it raises after the 10 years, the landlord can't come and say, well, I want this purchase price instead of this one. Always make sure you know what your terms are. Applying rent to the principal. You'll pay throughout your lease term. So that is correct. A lot of people think that you're just paying rent. You're not, but you are paying rent. That is part of your lease. You do not own the home. You're just you're purchasing it at a later time. So you do not own it. You'll pay rent throughout the lease term. The question is whether you pay a portion or are you paying the full purchase price. So that's what I meant by rental credits. If you're paying $1,200 a month and they're taking 25% of that and putting it towards the purchase price of the home, that is your rental credits. Okay? So, like I said, $1,200 a month, they take 25% of that out. That 25% is going towards your purchase price. So you need to be keeping track of that. Number one, you need to be knowing for a fact it's going into that purchase price and it's being saved. But for two, you need to know how much it is. If you don't have that locked in and then the landlord comes and says, well, now I want to take more money out, that needs to be locked in before anybody pays for anything. I'm paying $1,200 a month. This is how much of it is going towards the purchase price. This is how much of it is going towards you. So always keep that in mind. Some contracts, all or some of the option money you must pay can be applied to the eventual purchase price. And then that really boils down to your agreement, your terms. Normally it's written up by the seller or their attorney, so you, like I said, you really need to look that over. Don't just sign something you don't know what you're signing. Rent to own home maintenance. Depending on the terms of the contract, you may be responsible for maintaining the property and paying for repairs. Usually this is the responsibility of the owner because you don't own the home. Remember that. This is not like a traditional mortgage where at the end of closing, you're good to go. It's all yours. So if you go in and you make improvements to the home, you need to make sure you're allowed to. Look at your terms. Are you allowed to make improvements? If you do make improvements, who owns these improvements? Because at the end of it, if you don't purchase the home and you walk away, you may be responsible for putting the home back to the way it was. Or they may say, well, we're going to keep all of the improvements that you made and the money you spent on it. So always make sure your terms are favorable and you can agree to them without any problems. Always double check that. Normally, the homeowner is still responsible for taxes, um, upgrades such as like the roof needs to be redone, stuff like that. Normally, is left up to the owner, but he may require you to pay that out of pocket. So keep that in mind. And like I said, be sure to make sure it's clearly stated in your contract, not something that you discuss verbally. I know everybody likes to discuss things verbally these days. Do not discuss it verbally. Make sure it's in the contract. Buying the property, what happens when the contract ends depends partly on what type of agreement you signed. So remember, I said there's two: there's the lease to option and there's the lease to purchase. So at the end of this contract, you have the option to buy. If you purchase an option, you're not obligated or required to purchase the property. You're free to walk away at the end of the contract terms. You may lose your rental credits. 9 times out of 10, you will. Oh, excuse me. You may lose your rental credits and you will also lose your option fee. That is theirs. So just keep that in mind. Whereas a lease to purchase, you purchase at the end of the agreement, your option fee and your rental credits are applied to the purchase of the property. So keep that in mind. Conversely, like I said, if you do not to buy the house, you're unable to secure financing, whatever happens, something changed, option expires, you leave. For the purchase option, they can sue you if you cannot secure financing, such as a mortgage. That's pretty much it on that. Who are they right for? That's always a good question that I get. Is it a good idea to do a rent to own? Listen, rent to owns are typically for people who do not fit into the traditional home buying process, whether it be because of credit, closing costs, down payment, whatever the reason is. Their income is different, meaning they get paid a certain way, and that's why it's not registering, and they get kicked out of that traditional home buying bracket. If that is you, whether you're self-employed or whatever the case may be, and you just don't fit into that bracket, rent to owns are typically what those are for. Those are good for those people. It's good for people who, like I said, don't have the initial credit, because you can use this until you can up your credit, if that makes sense. So you say you're starting out now, you want a home, but you don't have the credit, you don't have the closing costs for that home, or you don't have the down payment for that home, you don't qualify for mortgage assistance or any down payment assistance or any of the programs like rural development or FHA, first time home buyer, whatever the case may be. This is an option for you. I do suggest, like I said earlier, if you're going to use this option, that's fine. Do your due diligence, do your research the seller, research the agreement, make sure you're using a title attorney, make sure you're using a real estate professional to show you the home. That way you can protect yourself. I always tell people it's not the end all be all, it's not impossible, and it's not the worst option there is out there. It's just more risky because you are putting money into it. And as long as you make sure the agreements are there, the contract is validated, you've had an attorney look over the agreement, I don't see any issues with it. I really don't. A lot of people have told me negative things about it. So it's kind of turned me off of it in the past, but it's only because you're involving a lot of that risk, and that 5 to 10 year time frame. You just really don't know what's going to happen. I definitely recommend it to people who know they have a financial change coming. So, like in the next 3 to 5 years, if you know you're going to get a better job, you're going to get a pay raise, you're in school right now and you're waiting to graduate. Say you're going to school for a bachelor's or whatever, and then when you get out, you will have a higher paying job. You're going to be able to work on your credit and raise your credit. It just needs time. If those are if you fit into any of those bubbles, then it's a good option for you because you have time. That's literally what it's for. It gives you that additional time to change your financial situation. And the hope is that your financial situation will change or get better, so that way you can purchase it at the end. You can purchase a mortgage or qualify for a mortgage at the end of said deal. Um, so that's really who it's for. Like I said before, signing the agreement, make sure that all legal obligations both benefit you and your financial situation. Make sure you're choosing the right terms, whether it be purchase or option. Make sure you're choosing the terms that benefit you and are right for your situation. If you know at the end of these 10 years, there's not without a shadow of a doubt that you can qualify for a mortgage or that your financial situation is changing, the option purchase stop. Let me stop. The option may be best for you. The purchase may not. So just keep that in mind. Always get help. Hiring a qualified real estate attorney that can explain the contract to you and understand your rights and obligations in a rent to own agreement, or a real estate professional. I will say this: a lot of people will use a real estate agent and not an attorney. You can use both, and I suggest you use both. Real estate professionals like myself are great. We have a good basic knowledge of rent to owns, but we do not, I can honestly say most of us do not know the law as good as an attorney. So always check with both. No one's going to sue you for using two people. Research the contract. Like I said, you need to know everything. What is the deadline? So if they say it's in 9 years and 10 months, you need to know what that is so that you can be prepared at the end of that deadline. The option fee and the rent payments, how much of it goes towards each. Like I said earlier, you can put 25%, 30%, but that needs to be defined and it needs to be agreed upon. So that way later down the road, nobody can make changes to it. How the purchase price will be determined, is it 1%, 5%? Are we going based off an appraisal? Meaning, so if the owner comes and says, well, I think my house is worth $200,000, and then you do an appraisal and it's worth 150, big difference. You need to know how it's being determined and what percentage you will be paying the option fee on. How to exercise your option to buy, for example, the seller may require you to provide advance notice in writing of your intent to buy. So every option is different, and you can define that option in the agreement. If you put in an option to say, well, I can buy it at any time, that needs to be defined. Oh, I can buy it in 5 years, that needs to be defined. All of it needs to be in the contract. Never leave it to a verbal agreement or a guess, because that's how you get sued. Whether pets are allowed, that is a huge one. If you don't have a dog now, and then you get a dog in 3 years, you're still in the same house. That needs to be defined, because that can be a reason for voiding it. At that point, you told me you didn't have a dog, and we agreed that you didn't have a dog, and then 3 years later you get a dog. That's not in the contract, so that needs to be defined. If you do get a dog and they say, well, I'm going to write in this contract, you can have a dog, but if you do get a dog, I need $1,000 non-refundable pet fee or pet deposit. That needs to be clearly defined. Never leave it up to a guess. Never leave it up to a verbal agreement. Who is responsible for maintenance, homeowner association dues, property taxes, and the like? That is also huge. If the taxes are not paid up, may not be the deal for you. Always make sure the property taxes are paid and then move on. What maintenance means, make sure you clearly identify in the contract. When they say maintenance, are you saying you just want me to cut the grass, or are you saying you want me to fix the roof? Make sure you know. Research the home. It's essential to do due diligence before buying any home, whether you're doing a mortgage or you're doing a rent to own. It's the same house. And at the end of that 10 years, if you go to get a mortgage for said home and the inspection and appraisal fails, then what did you do? Okay. Make sure you're researching the home and doing your due diligence on it. Research the seller. Working with the right seller can make a rent home experience a positive one or a negative one. It's helpful to look into the property owner's background before committing. You also may want to check the seller's credit report for signs of financial trouble and obtain a title report to see how long the owner has obtained the property. That's very important because, like I said, at the end of those 10 years, when you go to obtain a mortgage, if the seller doesn't own the home, then you're going to run into problems. If the seller is having credit situations or financial troubles, you're going to run into problems because then when his situation changes, so does yours. Make sure you're asking the right questions. If there's anything you're unsure of, it's better to ask questions sooner rather than later. That is the most important part. Don't wait until you have been paying 8 years into this lease to purchase, 8 years into this rent to own to ask the questions, and then now you lose everything. Ask up front. Make sure you know what you're getting into or signing up for. And like I said, it does differ from a mortgage. Renting to own is basically a hybrid approach to buying a home where all or a portion of the lease payment goes to building equity. So that's pretty much the biggest difference. So when you purchase a mortgage, it is yours. That is your home to do whatever you want. Refinance, sell, party, paint the walls, whatever. Whereas a lease is not the same. You are under obligations. You are under terms. And it is not yours until it's paid for. The advantages, like I said, it can allow a person to begin building equity, finances, whatever the case may be. It gives them time. That is the biggest difference between the two. What should be considered when renting to own? Rent-to-own contracts can vary significantly and require due diligence on the part of the renter. It's important to research the contract with the help of an attorney, research the home with the help of an appraisal and inspection, and research the seller. Your bottom line, a rent-to-own agreement allows a would-be homeowner to move into a home right away with several years to work on improving their credit scores. Of course, certain terms and conditions must be met. Even if a real estate agent assists with the process, it's essential to consult an attorney. So like I said, at the end all be all, the difference between the two, one gives you time, one does not. Rent to own gives you time to build your equity, build your finances, build your credit, build your financial situation as a whole. Mortgage is upfront and now. You must be able to be pre-approved, pay for the appraisal, pay for the inspection, and sometimes people don't have those upfront costs. The risks are different. With a mortgage, you own the home. It is yours to do whatever you want with it. You will be responsible for paying property taxes, everything that comes with an home ownership. Whereas a rent-to-own, you may not have all of the obligations as a homeowner. You may just be paying that lease until at the end of that term where you are responsible for either purchasing the home or using your option to purchase the home. I will not say one is better than the other in my opinion. In my opinion, it works for whoever it works for. Every financial situation is different. I just wanted to educate you guys on knowing and being more knowledgeable of the differences, and that a rent-to-own is not just you pay a lease and at the end of those 10 years it's all yours. You will be responsible for terms in the agreement, obligations in the agreement. That is what makes the difference between a rental and a leased a rent-to-own home. That's the biggest difference. The terms are different. You have more responsibility, and at the end of that, you will be responsible for purchasing or using your option. If you don't, you lose all of your funds. So just keep that in mind, guys, when you look into rent-to-owns. Always make sure you're using an attorney or a real estate professional. Always make sure you're doing your research and make sure that it is right for you. All right, guys. This is my workshop Wednesday, Work It Out Wednesday, my first one. I will be doing more. If there's any type of lessons you guys want to learn or things you want to look into or you want me to look into, just let me know and I'll keep you posted. All right.